A couple of years ago, a writer named David Sirota, also commentator, the guy behind the movie Don't Look Up, if you remember that, he wrote that he sometimes struggles to believe his social change efforts are meaningful. And if he's feeling despondent, I mean, it's not looking good for the rest of us. And he wrote the following. He said, "On my good days, I think the work matters. On my bad days, I think we're all just spamming the internet while billionaires and politicians laugh and the ecosystem collapses. The trick," he wrote, "is to have an internal monologue saying the former, not the latter, a trick," he says, "he has not yet mastered." And these feelings are familiar to those of us engaged in any kind of social justice activism. I hear them all the time in conversations following talks like this. Many of us feel like the condemned king, Sisyphus, forced to roll that monstrous boulder up a steep hill in Tartarus. Each time he was on the verge of pushing it over and accomplishing his task, and many people thought they might have accomplished their task in the 1960s. The boulder would roll thunderously backward, undoing all of Sisyphus' progress. Then, observed Odysseus, Sisyphus would, quote, heave, would struggle to thrust it up, sweat drenching his body, dust swirling above his head, end quote. I imagine some of you, like me, feel you are standing shoulder to shoulder with Sisyphus in a similarly hellish and futile labor. Some might object, siding with Professor Pangloss of Voltaire's Candide, that we actually live in the best of all possible worlds. We should be happy for what we have. Look at all the progress that's been achieved. We really need to stop complaining. We really should be more content with the way that things are. But you know, some adopt this kind of Pollyannish thinking in order to cope with the difficulty that they are experiencing, the pain, the suffering, the tragedy. But it's not productively coped with when it's dealt with through denial. The humanities, by contrast, equipped us to comprehend and to combat feelings of frustration, feelings of despair, feelings of futility. The best literature, though it may tell us stories of fantastical worlds, the best of literature prepares us to live in the real, and the real world presents us human beings with problems. As Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel said in a 1972 interview, a person can be judged by the quality of their problems. And anyone without real problems, and I want to quote him exactly so I don't offend anyone, or I don't want to be held accountable for what Joshua Heschel said. But he says anyone without real problems is, quote, an idiot. The greatness of man, Heschel explained, is that he faces problems. He said, I would judge a person by how many deep problems he's concerned with, end quote. And those of us who have not given up on our sensitivity to suffering, our sensitivity to injustice, have more problems than we can count, more problems than we can keep track of. Who in their right mind could not have a problem when the atomic scientists put the doomsday clock 85 seconds before midnight, a metaphorical representation of the increased risk of nuclear conflict and civilization-threatening catastrophe? When Oxfam International reports that 12, a dozen richest billionaires own more wealth than half of the population. That's 12 billionaires with more wealth than 4 billion people. We do have problems when climate scientists say that our leaders are failing across the political spectrum, failing to avert civilization-ending climate catastrophe. Who needs to go to the movies for apocalypses, right? And this is to say nothing of the dehumanization and the death endured by Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank at the hands, of course, our own country and one of our greatest allies. Meanwhile, President Trump continues not only to wage war on Iran at the cost of more than $100 billion with a B dollars, and the lives of now, as of yesterday, 16 U.S. soldiers, not to mention at least 3,500 Iranians. Trump administration, of course, also brings the war to the U.S., where masked men racially profile, brutalize, arrest, kill ordinary members of our community. in the name of keeping us safe. When we take all of this bad news into account, and I know you get plenty of it outside of a sacred space like this, we can be forgiven for thinking that things are very, very grim. So much so that many good-hearted, well-intended people just feel like tuning it out. And we all do, at least for a time. Got to come up for oxygen. But some of us stay there. Some of us stay and never go back under again. And give up. Let the boulder roll down wherever it's going to go. What can I do anyway? But, we would be very mistaken to think that we live in uniquely perilous times. The change agents who came before us, who gave us whatever we get to claim today, they faced bleak odds as they combated a precarious world that was every bit as fraught with cruelty and war and dehumanization and feelings of hopelessness and despair. None of this is new. This is the human condition. As Thomas Paine wrote in the early days of the Revolutionary War, quote, "These are the times that try men's souls." He added, and I have Sisyphus in mind, "Tyranny like hell is not easily conquered. Yet we have consolation with us that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph." So the triumph is going to be amazing. These change agents, from Frederick Douglass and Reverend King to Susan B. Anthony and Eugene Debs, were steeped not in political calculation and prognostication solely, but great works of religion, of philosophy, of music, dance, and the arts. It was this morning I was reading Eugene Debs, who mentioned Thomas Paine, who got me to throw that in there because these are trying times. And he mentions he was sustained not by talking heads and pundits. He was steeped in literary works. Contemporary U.S. politics lacks the spiritual, ethical, humanistic backbone that is necessary to sustain people through predictable feelings of dejection and air conditioners turning on like that thunderously, reminding us of how ominous times are. We are dealing with difficult circumstances, and the humanities, when they are unleashed of rigid academic confinement, offer us invaluable insights and existential nourishment necessary for us to combat the despair that we are inevitably going to experience more than a few times. The humanities encourage us to engage with great works and thinkers throughout the ages, to step out of the 24-hour news cycle to gain greater context for our lives and personal political projects. Henry David Thoreau was particularly critical of excessive attention to the news of the day, pointing out that it drew us away from inner knowledge and a broader understanding of life and existence. He wrote, "The news we hear for the most part is not news to our genius. It is the stalest repetition," end quote. Now look, Thoreau was not talking about investigative journalism. He referred to the prattle that too many of us consume, the horse race, the party loyalty stuff, the transformation of politicians, whether it's President Trump to President Obama, into celebrities that we want photographs with, that we bow down to, rather than that we take the responsibility to be taskmasters of. Thoreau argued that our obsession with daily trends, conflicts, left too little room for genuine inward reflection and independent thought. He wrote that, quote, "I believe that the mind can be permanently profaned by the habit of attending to trivial things, so that all of our thoughts shall be tinged with triviality." Who here does not have their minds taken up with any number of trivial matters or pieces of data that don't actually help do anything? We would do better to prioritize fundamental human principles and timeless insight over the ebb and flow of current events. Thoreau wrote, "We should treat our minds as innocent and ingenious children whose guardians we are. And be careful what objects and what subjects we thrust on their attention. Read not the times, read the eternities, he wrote. Now look, I'm the last person to recommend embracing ignorance and apathy concerning climate catastrophe, the threat of nuclear war, militarism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, economic exploitation, and the whole onslaught of other things we're faced with. We cannot afford to bury our heads in the sand, not in this spiritual sacred place and not outside of it. But neither can we afford to get lost in the granular and often demoralizing details of current events, so much so that we lose touch with our larger purpose, our values, our faith in humanity. We cannot permit the dulling of the very principled and imaginatively conscious needed to foster change. We need that imaginative consciousness to be stimulated. So I would say that if your information is causing you to lose confidence, your information consumption is causing you to lose confidence in the potential of humanity to transcend and overcome human oppression and degradation, then you probably need to counterweight it with humanistic insight. You need maybe more good music, which we got a taste of here today so far this morning, and I think you get every Sunday. We need more music. We need poetry. We need paintings. We need philosophy. We need good literature, good movies. We need to open a history book. We need to listen to contemporary musicians like Jesse Wells. We need to maybe listen to some Rage Against the Machine while we're at it. Throw in a book by Howard Zinn. Read a great book like The Dawn of Everything, A History of Humanity, which is fascinating because it's so turbulent and diverse and so many different pathways open to us, perhaps. And of equal concern is our tendency to fall prey to fatalism. I would say that there's no greater barrier to social change than fatalism, because fatalism, you see, is dressed up like pragmatism, like smart, intelligent, mature adults in the room. Fatalistic thinking thwarts the faithful pursuit of creative transformation. It fosters what I would describe as a self-regenerative defeatism. Fatalism leads us to assume the worst, that nothing can be done or overcome. And it's that very lens, it's that framework which produces inaction. It produces defeatism. It generates the very outcomes the doomsayers of dominant culture fatalistically insist are already decided. In other words, these are self-fulfilling prophecies. And we make them come true insofar as we buy in to this fatalism. Now, I think part of the problem is that many of the pundits that we rely upon, I don't care whether it's of old media or new media, many of them lack the cultural knowledge. They lack the humanistic vision to sustain creativity of thought and action. Let me put it to you this way. They may know the breaking news, but they are often ignorant of human history, ignorant of poetry, ignorant of cultural transformation and even revolution. Their world is confined to headline news and election cycles. They think in a way that a lot of our business leaders do, in quarterly returns. Their narrow study of the weather of human behavior prevents them from grasping the unwieldy, dynamic climate of human existence that is evidenced throughout history. In other words, their analyses, which we consume, manufacture more than they truly predict, because I think we allow them to ideologically frame and then therefore manipulate our choices and the meaning of our choices. Power meets us. Power meets us with all kinds of rationalizations for why people pursuing new paths are doomed to fail. It's always been this way, of why we must resign ourselves to climate chaos. Just make the best of it. Just live our lives to the best of our ability. Just protect our own immediate loved ones. Just accept that people die from inadequate health care. Just accept that economic inequality is ravaging the people around us. Accept that lesser evil voting in a duopoly is just all that we can ever get, all that we can ever hope for. These false prophets of reason. They exploit our hopelessness. They exploit our ignorance of the wider humanities. Power insists that the past is the only legitimate guide for the future, and that we must not stray from these well-worn paths. And to stray from them is to act like children, is to be foolish, is to be immature, is to be unrealistic, is to be idealistic, God forbid. Thus, our dream of taking new difficult paths is fated to fail. We're told it can't be done, it won't work, it's never been done before. Now, here's the thing. Critical thought reveals that the claim that the future is just a reflection of the past, that's a fallacy. It's the fallacy of insisting on the past. The mistaken claim that what has been of necessity will always be. It doesn't take a lot of reflection to recognize how false that is. Those who claim that new visions of society or politics are doomed because they previously failed are apparently ignorant of the fact revealed through historical study that all progress is what? All progress is birthed in defiance of today's status quo. It's always strikingly new. The abolitionists' aims were unrealistic. The suffragists' vision was absurd. An 8-hour workday was an impossibility. Each and every major social movement that we in this room have benefited from or believe in for substantial social change was derided as unserious idealism, if not dangerous subversion. All right, if it's too idealistic, doesn't work, then it's terroristic in nature. Just consider the U.S. labor rights movement began in large part in 1869 when a group of Philadelphia tailors had to meet in secret just to talk about how they might work together, bandy together. And it gave rise to the Knights of Labor, an organization that at its height had 1 million members in a short time and organized for the 8-hour workday. The claim of power that idealists are fated to fail relies upon another fallacy, ignoring the past. The spokespersons of power insist that the past dictates a bleak and defeated future. This idea leaves the rich histories of social transformation out of its telling of the past. Had our predecessors abided by the fatalistic ideology that they call pragmatic, we would have been starved of the progress that we again today sustain ourselves on. Howard Zinn in 2004 said the following: "To be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. If we remember those times and places, and there are so many, where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act and at least the possibility of sending this spinning top of a world in a different direction." End quote. Recent events also give us reason to not believe these doomsayers of fatalism. Whatever you think of this particular person, I think it's worth noting that we were told that the avowed democratic socialist and outspoken defender of Palestinian dignity named Zoran Mamdani had no chance of becoming mayor of New York City, had no chance of garnering the votes of a large number of Jewish voters in his community. The elite pundits and politicians insisted that Mamdani, who ran a grassroots campaign focused on affordability, had no chance of beating the well-founded former governor Andrew Cuomo, who had the backing of who? Bill Clinton, the Democratic Party establishment, and the billionaire Michael Bloomberg. No chance. But I ask you to ask the potholes in New York City how accurate those predictions were. Ask the people who currently in New York City are benefiting from rent-controlled housing. Ask the people currently benefiting from increased free child care how impossible it was. Following his victory, Mamdani told Jon Stewart that those in elite power had sold the public an erroneous story of political so-called reality. He said, the coalition you build can change that reality. Do we recognize that we make reality? We do not simply consume it. That is what the humanities reminds us. But Mamdani said, we changed it. We can keep changing it. End quote. If you don't like Mamdani, find somebody whose vision you do like. But the point is to recognize that we get to determine it. The real picture of reality, I think, was insightfully expressed by the pioneering children's rights advocate John Holt. A lot of people don't know John Holt, fascinating figure. He wrote a book called Escape from Childhood. He was one of the early pioneers of the children's rights movement. And speaking to his vision of what's possible, he said the following: as for the future, most of those who talk and write about it do so as if it already existed and as if we were being inexorably carried toward it, like passengers on a train moving toward a place they had not seen and could only wonder about. This, of course, is not true. The future does not exist. It has not been made. It is made only as we make it. The question we should be asking ourselves is, what sort of future do we want? End quote. And so my thought here is that we ought to spend less time deciding ahead of time what is possible, spend less time checking in with pundits who know so little of the wider humanities, and we should be thinking more about, what do we believe in? What do we care about? What do we love? And then act from that place. The humanities teach us that confronting fatalism and feelings of futility require courage and require humanistic faith. You know, too many people reduce faith to the belief strictly only in a higher power. The humanities teach us that faith at its core is a respect for and a recognition of human agency, of the capacity for human beings to do beautiful, novel, and at times unexpected things. And so I leave you with the following thought, that human history shows us that breakthrough moments of social progress are often born in the very ashes of pessimistic predictions that change is not possible. Humanity's trajectory is not so easy to determine, you know? And that can be frustrating. That can cause us pain at times. We expect things to last longer than they do, relationships to last and they don't. And at the same time, it's that openness that's filled with so much beauty and so much possibility, a new relationship to take the place of the old one. Human thought and action often defy calculation, I would encourage you to remember, reminding us of the importance of creativity and conviction in shaping the word. We ought to make more time for good music, more time for good literature, for film, for philosophy, for religion, for coming into spaces like this, and other features of the humanities that nourish our respect for the sacred value of human creativity, our capacity to transform ourselves in the world in which we live. As the free-spirited, cigarette-smoking, alcohol-drinking revolutionary of a Russian author, Zamyatin's 1920 dystopian novel, We, put it, she said at the end of the novel, "A human being is like a novel. Until the last page, you don't know how it will end." End quote. So let us never lose sight of the indeterminate character of human possibility, and let us lay claim to freedom, to justice, and joy, whatever the odds may be.
You should remember this. We sang it last week. If you'll stand as you're willing or able. Voice still and small, deep inside all, I'll hear you call, singing. In dark and rain, sorrow and pain, still you remain, singing, calming my tears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing.
Our closing words today are Flame in Our Hearts by Vanessa Tatang. Like the flame of the chalice, may the flame in our hearts burn, remaining unextinguished. May it ignite our energies, our drive, our resolve, to dream, to build, and live into the world, that good which exists for now only in our imaginings. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of transformation. These, of course, we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Announcements. Da-da-da. I don't have a list, so
You do. The green.
we do. Oh, there. Who knew? Rivergrass continues to, oh no, that announcement is over. Yay, we have a new child care lady starting next week. Roman is going to get a haircut. So he can come see it. But anyway, from Nicole, our office administrator, a quick note about the directory update. On July 10th, we emailed instructions for logging into your new ROG Google account. If you haven't done that yet, please take a few minutes this week to get it done. We'll be sending a follow-up email on July 20th with more help. That's tomorrow. The most common issue people are running into is needing access. I've been there. I've talked to her already, still not in. But anyway, when attempting to log in with their personal Google account instead of their ROG account. It's an easy mix-up. If that happens to you, don't worry about figuring it out alone. Just call or email the office at office@riverofgrassuu.org for help, or we can even email book a time for you to bring your phone, tablet, laptop to the office so Nicole can work you through the process. 954-723-7877. Next Sunday, Leanna, Robert, and Theo will share their experiences from GA last month. Woo! Perhaps they learned how to change the world. Yeah. Or at least bring home strategies to help River of Grass. Okay. And now, yes, I invite you to stay and enjoy coffee, great snacks, and fellowship the River Way. You're phenomenal.
In these changing times, let us be all the more vigilant to hold before us a vision of the world transformed and dare to transform ourselves to make it so. Until we meet again, shine on.